Ulbricht. My son, Ross Ulbricht, was the defendant in the Silk Road case and the creator of the site. He is now serving a double life plus 40-year sentence about 150 miles south of here in Florence, Colorado, in a maximum security prison where the Bureau of Prisons normally puts its most violent criminals. Ross is nonviolent, has no charges of violence, and no criminal history at all. He is in there for basically creating a website that was designed to protect the anonymity and privacy of its users, and used what was very little known at the time, Bitcoin. And it was basically product agnostic. It was whatever people chose to buy and sell, with some rules. That anything that created victims or was not voluntary was not allowed. That included child pornography, for example, or stolen property. But otherwise, it was an open market, unregulated, and people chose to buy and sell legal things like art and books, and they also chose to buy and sell illegal things such as drugs. And for this, Ross has been given a more harsh sentence than many murderers, kidnappers, and other violent people. And so we're here to discuss that. It's very serious. It's not just Ross that is being impacted here. It is the fact that the government can do something like this to someone who is nonviolent and use what was a travesty of a trial that was rife with corrupt investigators and suppressed evidence. And there's a lot of information at freeross.org. But it's the larger implications and what the government is doing in general and how we're losing our freedoms that's important here. So I'm joined by some other people who have a lot to say as well. And so we don't have a moderator, so I guess we can just maybe, if you want to say something, each person say something. Start
I don't know. Should I start out? Or
Yeah, you start, Doug. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, my feeling is, since I tend to monitor a lot of countries around the world and what's going on in them, it seems to me that all of the countries around the world are getting worse from the point of view of personal freedom. So what happened to Ross Ulbricht is symptomatic of what can happen to absolutely any of us. And this is why, incidentally, I've been an anarchist, actually since 1971, because I figured out some time ago that since the state is pure force, pure coercion, and in a civilized society, you want to limit coercion and force as much as you can. Therefore, you want to limit the state. Seems like a very logical thing to me because it's institutionalized coercion. But it's worse than that, because necessarily you don't get the best and brightest to go into government. You get the worst and the most criminally oriented kind of people that go into government. Government in Washington, D.C., or any of these capitals in the world draw these horrible people that are way on one side of the bell-shaped curve as far as criminal tendencies, much the way Las Vegas draws gamblers, or New York draws financial guys, or Hollywood draws starlets. Certain types of people go to D.C. or other government centers. So it's not going to get any better, and that's why, I don't know how many of you are on this side of the thing, but the whole institution of the state it's one of the worst ideas that has ever been come up with. But it's getting worse all over the world. All these damn nation states are getting worse right now. There's only one, crazy, I'll just mention this. There's only one nation state in the whole world that, against all odds, is getting better for the time being. In Argentina, where I spend a lot of time, they had this psychopathic criminal named Christina Kirchner, who was running the country for the last 10 years. Really, it was going in the direction of Venezuela. And against all odds, the Argentines kicked her out and put in a guy named Macri, who, in my opinion, is probably the most decent person in the world that's a head of state. Well, you can't be too decent and be the head of state, but he's the best there is. But every other place I can think of, it's going the wrong way. So you're in a lot of danger. And that's why I support doing something for Ross, if it's possible, because all of us could be in exactly that position. In fact, I was telling Lynn, I had two friends, Bob Brown, who founded Soldier of Fortune magazine, and Peter Lynn, who founded Paladin Press, and both of them were prosecuted for their platforms doing just exactly the type of thing that Ross was prosecuted for. So this is not going to go away.
So I'll add a little bit more to that. So, and I'd also like to say, Doug Casey, you don't know me, but I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. So,
well, and I just saw somebody sent me this thing about, what are you raising $100 million for a new country in Africa?
So the location hasn't been determined yet, and this isn't exactly what the panel is about. But we have already raised more than $100 million US. And we're looking to figure out the correct way where we won't get in trouble with these thugs in Washington, D.C. and other places. But we want to allow the public to be able to participate as well. And we think we can raise somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion. And we're going to go directly to existing governments around the world and try and buy a piece of land and have it be its own sovereign non-nation. And if you've ever read The Machinery of Freedom by David Friedman, we plan to base this land off of the ideas in that book.
I prefer Tannehill's The Market for Liberty to Friedman's book. But, you know, my hobby, you probably know this, my hobby for the last 30 years has been going around to, you know, the bottom of the barrel countries, preferably ex-people's republics and military dictatorships, and sitting down with the president and trying to pitch him on taking his country public and turning it into a libertarian paradise. And I've got lots of wonderful cocktail stories. Never succeeded, never will be, but you got to amuse yourself somehow. So,
and I'd love to, maybe we can connect on this topic after the panel at some point. Or
we're going to catch up.
Okay. But in regards to the Silk Road, for anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Roger Veer. I was the first person in the entire world to start investing in Bitcoin startups. And the reason I heard about Bitcoin was actually I heard it being discussed in relation to the Silk Road. And if it wasn't for that, I would have heard about Bitcoin at a later date. And one of the first things I did when I heard about the Silk Road is I went on there and started looking around. And there weren't very many products for sale at the time. Mostly it was some marijuana and some other things like that. But what an interesting concept for me, because my entire hobby had been for decades plus before that, had been studying economics. And then I saw, I had heard about the ideas of digital cash, but here it was in action and people were using it. And if people were using it to buy and sell things that weren't necessarily permitted by governments, that meant it was a better form of money than the other forms of money that people are using in day-to-day lives. So the fact that Ross built basically an e-commerce website and now has a double life sentence is just intolerable. But as Doug said, these aren't the cream of the crop that are in government. And these are people that are willing to burn dozens of kids to death in a church in Waco, Texas. They're willing to drop bombs on kids around the world. They're willing to nuke cities filled with civilians. These aren't good people. So it's horrible what they've done to Ross, but these are horrible people that do horrible things. And the best that we can possibly do is through better technology, build tools to stop them from doing these horrible things in the future. And that's why I got involved in Bitcoin. I've been a libertarian for decades and decades. Since I started studying economics, that's what turned me into a libertarian or an anarchist or a voluntarist, whatever word you want to use. And I had my own run-in with the law, and actually I did 10 months in federal prison. And definitely for my political views and the things that I said politically. And once I got out of prison, I kept my mouth shut, and I didn't say anything about politics to anybody about anything ever until Bitcoin came along. And I recognized Bitcoin as being kryptonite to the state. And I knew that there was no way I could keep my mouth shut. So I started telling every single person I could get to listen about Bitcoin and the ways in which it undermines the state. And here we are today. Now I have a new nickname that I'm not particularly fond of, but I'm so excited about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because they undermine the state. They undermine these violent people's ability to control peaceful people. And that's what all of our goals should be in life, is to minimize the amount of coercion in the world And the absolute best tools we have to do that are cryptocurrencies, and that's why I got involved in Bitcoin. And hopefully one day in the near future, it can be used to release every single nonviolent offender from every prison in the world. Anybody that's there for any sort of victimless crime should be let out. If there's no victim, there's no crime. And in Ross's case, he built an e-commerce website that maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of people around the world benefited from and enjoyed and liked. And I spent countless hours on the forum of the Silk Road reading all sorts of interesting theories. And people are much more willing to say what they really think when they're on a forum where that, allows them to post anonymously. One of my favorite forum threads on the Silk Road was about somebody who probably was high on something at the time he was writing this, but he really, really, really wanted a monkey. And in his country, you were not allowed to have a monkey unless you had some sort of permission from a bunch of people you have never met. So there were some other people on the forum that were probably also high on something that were agreeing to sell him a monkey. And I was reading the thread, and they had negotiated a price of about... Someone hide your microphone. They had negotiated a price of 1,000 euros. And so then they had to figure out how to deliver the monkey to this person. And the method they came up with was that they were going to dress up the monkey in a dog costume and ship it with a dog shipping company. And it wasn't clear from the forum thread if they actually shipped the monkey dressed up as a dog or not. But it was clear from the people discussing things on this forum that these weren't bad people. These were just people who wanted to have a pet monkey. And the person that set up this platform that allowed people to discuss selling pet monkeys dressed up as dogs through dog shipping companies is now serving a double life sentence. And that should just bring a tear to your eye. If you want to buy a pet monkey, go ahead. And now it's horrible, Ross. And it's funny about the dog monkey dressed up in a dog costume, but Ross is having a rough time every single day. And Ross isn't the only victim of the Silk Road. There are probably dozens or maybe 100+ people that are now in prison for engaging in voluntary free trade, buying and selling products that ultimately make people happy. The reason people are willing to risk years or decades in prison over drugs is because they really, really like those drugs. Otherwise, they wouldn't be willing to risk such severe penalties to get those drugs. And so a bunch of other people that don't know anything about these people's lives think, oh my God, people might be having a good time by using a substance that makes them feel happy. We better lock all of these people in a cage for years and years and years. And it's not the people that are using the drugs or selling the drugs that are the bad people. It's the people that want to lock those people that are feeling happy from using these substances in jail. It's the people that want to put those people in jail and that sentence them to jail and that go and arrest them. Those are the bad people, and those are the people that need to stop. And that's why I got involved with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I see this as a method to defund the salary of all these people that want to lock people in jail. It can defund the paychecks of all these politicians. It can completely undermine the ability of all of these violent people to control the peaceful people around the world. And up until the invention of Bitcoin, we didn't have the ability to do that. And right now, we need to build all of those tools to do that. And that's why I'm involved in Bitcoin every day. And I think that's why a lot of the other people in this room are involved. And keep your eye on the prize. That's the end result. That's why I think a lot of us are involved in Bitcoin, and certainly almost all of the earliest adopters is because it's kryptonite to the state, and it undermines the ability of every one of these violent people to control peaceful people around the world. And hopefully that will help get Ross out of prison sooner rather than later. But I did 10 months in federal prison. I would guess around 80% of the people where I was were there for victimless crimes. My bunkmate was there for growing and selling marijuana, and he had a 14-year sentence, right? And granted, it wasn't a small amount of marijuana, it was a lot. But this is a plant that makes people feel happy. And this guy had a 14-year sentence. And when I was there, when I left, he still had like 8 years to go. And I was so fortunate to have him as a bunkmate. He kept his stuff clean, I kept my stuff clean. I was really, really fortunate to have him as a bunkmate. And when it was my day to leave the prison, I told him, I'm glad to be going, but at the same time, I'm sad to say goodbye. And Alan Min, if you hear this, thank you for being such a great bunkmate. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry they did that to you.
To add, it is sad, it's terrible, it's tragic, but it's also terrifying, because this is what our government in the land of the free is doing to thousands, millions of people, actually. And the life sentences have quintupled since the 80s, and 17,000 people serving life today are nonviolent. They're in there for nonviolent offenses. They're serving life. Ross has a friend that he's made where he is now, named Tony. He's in there for life for selling marijuana. Again, probably a fair amount of marijuana, but it's marijuana. He's done 20 years already, and ironically, this federal prison's in Colorado, where it's legal. And but of course, the drug war is not about drugs. It's obvious. It's about power and money, lots of money. All you have to do is go to the prison, and the millions and millions of dollars just in this one prison, and you're like, wow, someone's making a lot of money here. And as far as I'm concerned, if human beings are the product, that is human trafficking, plain and simple, and it's a human rights crisis here. And one other thing, we're talking about Bitcoin being a threat to the state. The judge in Ross's case made it very clear that it was the philosophy on that site, which was very libertarian, anti-government, anti-state. She said, I don't know, that's a philosophy you've left behind. She cited it in violation of the First Amendment. And I believe that and Bitcoin, Chuck Schumer, who was behind the case, was on the Senate Finance Committee. I doubt they were happy about suddenly a currency they could not control, they could not tax, and that's what it was about, I believe. So it's something, it's very sad, and it is sad. I've cried many, many times at the prison, not only for Ross, but the other families I've gotten to know. But it's also something, it's alarming. It's horrifying, and it's enraging. And I don't think we need to be, people, it's easy to forget, because we aren't maybe impacted every day, but I'm hoping that Ross's case can shine a light on it and have us realize we're not that far behind. Judge Napolitano referenced it, as did Ed Griffin. We're not that far from ourselves being carted off somewhere. So I think that's one of the the good things about this, hopefully with a happy ending for Ross and others. But I think we need to wake up.
My name is Tatiana Moroz, and it's so low. Sorry. And I'm a singer-songwriter. I got involved with the Liberty Movement because I wanted to be involved in something that could help the world. And when I found out about the presidential elections not really being what I thought that they were, which was fair or, I don't know, lawful, I gave up and I went into Bitcoin, which was really quite surprising to me. And one of the first... Hello? Okay. One of the first things I learned about in the Bitcoin space was the Silk Road. And I thought, I don't care about this. How does this affect me? It seems like maybe not such a good idea to make a site like that. But I was lucky enough to meet with Lynn. And for me, it was a real eye-opener learning firsthand from her about all the corruption in the case. But what was even more startling was when I went to actually go and visit Ross. I've gone to visit Ross, I don't know, at least a dozen times now. And now he's in Colorado, but before when he was in New York, he could only get 1 hour a week. That's it, on Wednesdays. And so the first time that I went to the prison was one of the most scarring, kind of traumatic, and also life-changing things that ever happened to me, because we're all in this room and we all talk big and we say, oh, we're gonna fight the state, we're gonna fight the power. Until you go into that jail cell, you have no idea what you're even dealing with. And as a good person, good people don't think of bad things, because that's just not in our capacity, and it's almost like a fatal characteristic. So after meeting Ross and also seeing just how awful the prisons are, I would see little children kind of crawling all over their daddies, being like, "No, when are you coming home?" And these children that were getting good grades and now getting D's and F's. I mean, this is something that isn't only affecting the people that are in the prison, but it's affecting their families. And I think that, it makes you feel so powerless to know somebody who is as kind and thoughtful and unbelievably resilient and inspiring of a person as Ross. But then when you kind of get to know the families and when you get to see that it's something that's rippling out through our society, it's not something that you can look away from, and I think that that's really important.
Tell a little bit about Ross, because people like to know.
Sure. Well, what do you guys want to know about Ross? I mean, one of the things that really struck me when he first wrote me was his ability to see the positive in this situation. I mean, he wrote me about how, I'm in prison, but at least I get 3 meals a day, and at least I'm only sharing a cell with one person. There are prisons out there where there are much worse conditions, and I'm really lucky. And it's his unbelievable ability to constantly see the almost moral position and embody that. And I don't know, I mean, as a person involved in these sort of activist movements, sometimes you get really disappointed with your heroes. And Ross never ceases to be my hero. And I think I'm a better person because of that. And I think what's really important about this moment in time where we've got somebody who is that, right? Who is really walking the walk, is that we have a story that we can tell. And for me, the way that I've kind of decided to spread the message about the Silk Road is through music. I wrote a song. But another thing that was kind of really neat was Ross, I would draw pictures for him just for fun, because how do you comfort somebody in that situation? You want to give them something that you can make. You can't send him anything. And so for my birthday, he drew a picture of me. And when I put out my album, which was funded completely with cryptocurrency, I used him as the album cover, and I use that as like a talking point, because number one, it gives me an opportunity to tell this story, but it also underlines our inability to express these travesties within our art. And I think that this is not something that we will necessarily win in court without the support of the people. So I'm really grateful for films like Deep Web that can easily convey this idea. I'm grateful for Roger's contributions, really big contributions, Doug's contributions, Lynn's hard efforts, and the efforts of so many people in this room and beyond. We've been so lucky to go around the world. I mean, in this disgusting, horrible situation, there's been such beauty in going and meeting with people and getting to talk to them about this and seeing that this isn't something that only faces people in America. This is a worldwide issue. This is a human rights abuse, and it has to stop. And it's not going to stop unless people start doing something about it. I don't think the government's going to all of a sudden say, yeah, this guy gave us the big fat FU. Let's let him out. That seems like the right thing to do. That's not what they're going to do until people are holding their feet to the fire. And I think that really extends to all of the work that we're trying to do here. And luckily, we're so empowered with cryptocurrency. So, I mean, even in this darkness, there is so much light in this room alone. And I'm just, I wish that Ross could be here because he would love this. And it's so awesome to be able to tell him about these stories. And as like a side thing, if you guys get a chance, write him a letter in prison, and he will write you back, and he's a really cool guy, and get to know who that person is. Or see some of the blog content on freeross.org. There's a poem called Invictus, and he uses it and then goes to describe his experience. And if there was ever it was one of the most beautiful, eloquent things I've ever read. And it's a testament to his character that we should all embody as we go forward.
And just also on our website is 100 letters written to the judge, who didn't seem to care about them, from people who know Ross and attesting to his character and how he had contributed to their lives. He's really, and I've come to realize how exceptional a person he is. He inspires me. He keeps me going. There was a time just recently where I was just like kind of being negative about some of the people involved in the case. And he was just like, no, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to stay positive. I'm going to go for the goal. It's going to be okay. And he's very disciplined about what his thoughts and how he's to stay strong. Because if you can get so bitter. I mean, this is 4 years now that he's been in a cage. And it's very frustrating. He would love to be here talking to you guys about cryptocurrency and all the exciting things that are happening. And he's totally cut off. And yet he doesn't get bitter. He keeps me going. And anyway, that's just a sense of who he is. He's just an amazing person.
I actually have a specific point about that because this was something that really knocked me out. So Ross had 2 known, confirmed corrupt agents that were stealing money from the site, setting them up, all sorts of great things. And one of them was supposed to go to jail. And because, you know, he's a federal agent, he gets to kind of turn himself in whenever it's convenient. And I guess a couple days before he was supposed to, he chickened out. He stole a bunch of Kevlar vests, had a bunch of fake passports, and him and his wife were going to hit the town. And so he got busted. And I was like, great, you know, get him. And I got an email. I got an email. No, he's not allowed to have email. God forbid. Can't do that. I got a letter from Ross, and he had heard about it. And he's like, yeah, you know, it's really unfortunate for him and his wife. They must have been really scared. I feel really bad for them. And I was like, are you effing kidding me? This guy set you up. You're rotting in prison, and this is the kind of person that is in prison. So just, I mean, when you speak about Ross's character, it's hard to say right on the spot what it is about him that's so great and that makes you feel like you can also be a better person. But I think that that's one of those stories where that compassion that he had for somebody who is so, like, his enemy. I'm so impressed with that. And that's all that we really get is inspiration at this point.
So how can we support you guys? For instance, how can we get money on his books, on his commissary? And how do we support you with, I'm sure, like all your administrative costs that you have in the back?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. There's a website, freeross.org. It has a way to contribute to his commissary. It has a way to donate to his defense fund, which, of course, is one of the ways that the government crushes people, is that how can any normal person afford this? But we had great support. Roger Veer to my left has made it possible, really, for us to get to where we are. Of course, there's been many, many others, but Roger's really tipped the scales there, and he is a real freedom fighter, as is Doug, as is Tatiana. I'm very privileged to be among such great people, and I've said to Ross, you know, the silver lining in this, if you weren't in prison, this would be great, you know? We just got to get you out.
You know, I'd like to ask Doug a question.
Well, can I just finish how you can help me? And so you can buy on Amazon through our site. We get a little there. You can, there's a tax-deductible option through American Black Cross that helps political prisoners and other ways. Also, though, connections. You know, we need connections. We need high-level connections, and and advice, and then just plain out work. You know, it's a lot of work, and so we're going to be petitioning. Ross is going to be petitioning the Supreme Court. This is hopefully can work for greater things, and so you can always contact me through that website and help in whatever way you can. And of course, social media, spread the word, change the narrative. Ross has been terribly smeared with uncharged allegations that now people think, this must be true. And apparently they do this to lots of people. They don't charge you at trial. They don't prosecute it. They don't have to prove it. You don't get to defend yourself. It's just the way it is if enough media tools of the government say it. So, yeah, so freeross.org is the hub where you can help. And also there's ways here. There's a raffle. That there's a lot of people have donated great things, including 21 ounces of silver from Tim Fry, a stay in the Marathon Motel in Texas, and different wonderful, lots of stuff. Tatiana CD. And so there's a raffle out there, $5, and it goes to help Ross' defense. It all goes to his defense. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, internationally, you travel a lot, Bitcoin has become a thing, you're interested in this, you know what's going on. And I'm wondering what other governments and other people around the world perspective is of Ross. You know, do they understand what's going on? Are they supportive? They see him as a bad guy? What's your impression?
Well, I don't think outside of the U.S. most people know about what happened to Ross. And most people in these governments, especially governments in the Orient, but all over the world, I mean, they're really on board with this drug war. In a way, I mean, even though it's criminal the way he was railroaded here in the U.S., good thing that this didn't happen to him in some third world country or in the Orient. That would have been very bad news.
I can say we do have a lot of international support. It's probably not huge numbers, but we get lots of contributions and messages and emails and social media support from all over the world. And I've realized the world is not about nations anymore. It's about statists and freedom people. And the ones who want to control us, and we don't want to be controlled.
Unfortunately, we are like genetic mutants that are just a fraction of a fraction, and we're not even a rounding error in the world.
So I'll add one little story to that. So unfortunately, we are the minority in the world. But one of the really fun parts about cryptocurrencies is I have a friend that I know in Tokyo, and he's definitely not a libertarian. He loves the drug war. He loves taxes. He can't imagine a world in which the roads would get built without any of those things. But he saw Bitcoin as a way to make some money. So he wanted to buy some Bitcoin. And so I helped him and guided him how to buy some Bitcoin. And then I didn't see him for maybe a month or so. And the next time I ran into him, he came up to me almost in a panic. He says, Roger, I need your help. And I'm like, what's wrong? What can I help you with? And he goes, and the Bitcoin price had gone up, I don't know, 5-10 times in that period of time since I saw him last. He goes, Roger, I need you to show me how to hide my Bitcoin so I don't have to pay taxes on them. And so I think that's an example how Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies turn even non-libertarians into libertarians in practice. So.
For Lynn, I'm reading a book called American Kingpin, which is a story about your son. And I heard that Fox bought the rights and they've hired the Coen brothers to write and direct for a big budget feature. Do you welcome that millions upon millions of people are going to perhaps see your son's story on the big screen?
Well, first, let me correct. The Coen brothers, from what I've been told, wrote the script a long time ago, or paid $1 million to write it, and then they got kicked off the project, and there's another writer on it, and I heard it was stalled. So I don't know if that's still true. I heard that. As far as Nick Bilton's book, I was told by someone has never led me wrong and is an insider in that world that the government fed him and people involved in it material a year before trial, or well before trial. And as far as I can see, it's a narrative. It's the government's narrative in fictionalized form. Don't welcome it, no. I haven't even read it because it's kind of painful for me, and I have to conserve my emotional energy because I've got bigger fish to fry. But Nick Bilton pressured me in a way, or certainly encouraged me strongly to be part of the project, and I was warned, don't do it. He's a government guy, and he certainly is. Ross, of course, is frustrated because he can't defend himself. We sent him the book because he wanted to read it, and the prison never would deliver it. He hasn't gotten to read the book. They took it, I guess. And so I've heard things that are in there. I don't know. I haven't read it. So someone told me, a lawyer told me, that there was something in there saying Ross got his lieutenants to dox the judge. I don't know. I have to look at that. But it's a lie. It's a complete lie. He didn't. In fact, it was one of the most damaging things for Ross that someone did dox the judge, because I think it really freaked her out, and I thought it made her think he was dangerous. It was terrible that they did that. We condemned it, but it happened. It's easy to fight for, be a rebel when you're safe and behind your computer, and someone, and dox the judge. It was really stupid. But anyway, but then it's misrepresented. Now, I've read some excerpts, and I know firsthand he distorted things that I personally know, and so I think it's basically a treatment for a movie, and it's dramatized, And, it's probably a mix, but I know even the facts are distorted. I can just give you a quick example. Well, they call Ross a computer programmer. He's not, never was. Said he lived in a basement, this dark basement, and he was this weirdo. I was in that basement. It was a finished basement with a carpet. I stayed there. He owned the house and rented rooms to college students. He was one. That was the basement. Yeah, okay, he lived in a basement. Okay, it's true. This is the kind of distortion. And then, of course, he also was like, well, he was thinking this and he was feeling that and all of this. And I'm like, really? So now you're a psychiatrist, you're a mind reader, judge, jury, and executioner. Take it with a grain of salt. I haven't read it. I've just read those excerpts. But I think it's basically the government was not confident to try Ross for murder for hire in the courtroom and have to prove anything. And they got Nick Bilton to do it for them in the court of public opinion.
I also just wanted to add to that. I find the timing of the book's release with the appeal judgment, I guess, whatever you call it, coming down. So basically, for those of you that don't know, the book came out, smear, horrible, crap, murder, blah, blah, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, that's when the bad news came down, that the courts had sort of obviously denied his appeal. So that was odd timing, I think. And I feel like maybe they're trying to prep the public opinion because it was such a disgusting sentence.
Yeah, and it's hard to fight Penguin Books and then Vanity Fair murder case. First of all, no one was murdered. I'm like, what's murder? Oh, they called it a murder mystery. I'm like, murder mystery? Who got murdered? They've sensationalized all this stuff, and I've been told by other people that it's happened to them. I've had many people write and said, yeah, I've been smeared. And it's a way to ruin people and have the public agree with it. And they have tools in the media.
Put forth, though, that in terms of doxing the judge, while in this context at that time it might have been a bad move, that it's a good tactic, and that that's where the big pain point in the system comes from, is you have judges that sentence people for victimless crimes. And should there be documentation of this, for instance, when we have judges that are sentencing children to rape camps because they're getting a kickback, should those judges have been doxxed and publicly shamed, maybe that would have slowed down the velocity on it. So I still think it's a viable method, just was bad in this case. Not that I was the one that did it. But the thing is bringing stuff to light, data and facts, helps basically reduce their power and their credibility and their dignity in the public eye. And so it can be something that I think maybe is underutilized. Just to put that out there. That's my 2 cents.
Something that, when people talk about how they can help, we were having a conversation earlier and the lady was saying, bring everything to the light and document everything. And Lynn's comment was, well, I don't have access to anything because the government has, certain things, right? So I don't know, maybe we can sort of put our minds together and think about ways that evidence can be uncovered. I think that would be sort of useful, or some sort of tracking of the transactions to trace it back to this corruption or that corruption. I don't know.
There's more corruption. I'm sure we only know the tip
I
of
don't
the
know
iceberg
either.
here. Yeah. And it would be good if it came out, and it does slowly come out. But I think, I didn't mean to say that, I mentioned yesterday, after the trial, the government dumped 6 terabytes, which is the equivalent of 2.5 billion single-space pages on the defense to go through. And so, of course, they didn't go through it all, but after trial found evidence of tampering by someone with high-level admin access, where they deleted big sections of sensitive information, and also someone using the Dread Pirate Roberts account logged into the Silk Road Forum 7 weeks after Ross was in prison. Who was that? There's a lot of unanswered questions here. The corrupt agents who are now in prison, a lot of their emails are still encrypted. There's still sealed evidence. There's still undisclosed evidence by the government. Why? They're in prison. Why is this still secret? What are you hiding? So I don't know if it's possible to find out, but.
Lynn, could you speak to the fact that you can't even get some of the transcripts?
No, I have the transcripts.
I mean, some of the information that was changed into court.
Oh, well, the judge, on some information that came across at trial, she struck it from the record, told the jury to pretend, it was about an alternate perpetrator. It was all coming out, a government agent who had been on the site for 2 years, 1,000 hours, suspected actually Mark Karpelis. He also said he thought there were more than one DPR of being DPR. And it was coming out, and it got shut down. The judge was like, oh, yeah, this is relevant. And then by the next day, it was shut down. And she told, forget you ever heard that to the jury. Just forget you ever heard that. Just never mind. And then she went back and tagged where the prosecutor should have objected to the cross-examination and retroactively sustained those objections, which is unheard of. So I think she, was somewhat biased. In my opinion. That's just my opinion.
I have a happy monkey story that I want to share as well, which is that is one side of the silk road that's beautiful, but there's another side that's underreported, which is that there's 1 million kids with epilepsy in this country, and many of them cannot tolerate altitude that they seize. This tends to be a place where a lot of them get access to CBD. There were many parents relying on the Silk Road to keep their kids alive and giving them access to CBD. So the murder mystery story here isn't about Ross and that. It's about the children that are dying because they can't get access to meds that were available to them very easily. So,
Not to mention harm reduction and taking, it out of kind of the black market, violence, street corners. How many kids didn't get killed? How many kids didn't get arrested? How many kids aren't in care?
Lynn, I'd like to, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that real briefly, and the underlying principle that each and every one of us in this room owns our own body. And if you want to smoke pot, if you want to smoke crack, if you want to drink bleach, your body belongs to you, and a bunch of strangers have absolutely no moral authority whatsoever to tell you what you can or can't put in your own body.
And besides, they have no constitutional authority. For the first prohibition, they had to pass an amendment, the 13th Amendment, and then repeal it 13 years later, I think, or something. They didn't bother with an amendment this time. They just declared that drugs were illegal and decided they had the self-given authority to do this. It's unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm not a big fan of the U.S. Constitution to start with, but I've got to say that the good parts of the Constitution, which are basically entirely the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, it's a dead letter, totally dead letter in every single regard. It's a sham.
Lynn, was there any come to Jesus moments for any of the prosecution or the FBI invested? Did anybody ever give you any indication that they felt bad about it, or they were in the wrong, or these guys stormtrooping Zeke Highlands?
I haven't seen evidence of any of that in a prosecutor ever. And I don't know. As a group, I don't have a lot of regard for them.
Were they selected by Schumer or something?
Well, the judge was recommended by Schumer. She owes her job to Schumer, which I find interesting. But as far as the prosecutors, they're working for Preet Bharara in Southern District of New York. Ross had no connection to New York whatsoever. They came up with a really flimsy excuse to have it in New York. But when New York wants a case, they get it. They've been called the mafia, the other mafia of New York. And so I don't know. Saron Turner was working under Preet Bharara. He's now in the private sector. He bailed out on this after the trial. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And Preet Bharara's been fired by Trump, which is a good thing, in my opinion. But yeah, but I don't know. I don't know why anyone goes into that line of work if they're not, well, yeah.
I wanted to add something to that point. My friend Kingsley's dad is Michael Edwards. He's down in Florida, and he went to prison for, I guess, selling a tablespoon of cocaine to his girlfriend, and she set him up. And I think it's a 40-year sentence, 64-year sentence. He's been in there now for 24 years. And they have everybody, the prosecutors, they've all repented. And they've asked for petition for him to be released. Even the guy who like put him in prison is saying, please let this guy out. And guess what? He's still in there because the structure in Florida, they're so backed up with this. Of course, you know, they spend tons of money on this department and they've got all these applications to get him released, and there's all these other people before him. They haven't even looked at his application. So there have been a ton of different news stories in that region, and so many people that signed on to get him out of there, and he's still rotting in there. So I don't really think that their feelings matter that much because it seems like that even that doesn't help.
If you start reading these stories and hearing these stories, I'm like, this is my country, you know, and it's been hijacked. That's as far as I can see.
Lynn, it is your country because when you watch television, you watch these cop shows, these police shows like Law and Order, very popular, Cops, very popular, and they always present the cops and the prosecutors as straight arrows and honest and all that. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of the cops either. In fact, I'm not a fan of many things. And frankly, you don't become a cop unless you have an extra Y chromosome to start with. I mean, it draws really aggressive kind of guys. And these prosecutors, they're really horrible. I mean, I met the prosecutor here at Aspen, and Jesus, the guy gave me a nightmare. He was such a sociopath. And they like to go into that because they like to dominate other people and use the law to do it. But the average American loves these cop shows and thinks they're accurate. So those are your fellow Americans you're relying on.
I did have a criminal defense attorney who was a prosecutor tell me, he goes, Lynn, they lie, they cheat, they do what they need to do to win.
Absolutely.
And it's a notch in their belt, and it's a career move. I mean, and when they're caught violating, they don't get fired. There's no repercussions.
And
Promotions to the people that prosecuted Ross? I mean, are they like, more guy can move from all these to pay and something?
Well, Saren Turner works in the private sector, I'm sure, for a lot of money. Timothy Howard was under him. He's been promoted, I believe. He's now kind of moved up. Jared Deryagan, who was the lead investigator and witness, who said there were many DPRs and all of that, I believe he's had a promotion. I don't know for sure, but I think so. He was certainly sitting up front with all those guys when I saw him, and I think he maybe has. But in any case, it is a career move, yeah.
being a prosecutor is an excellent way to climb the political ladder. Look at Giuliani. I mean, being a prosecutor is the first step in the...
They're very ambitious.
Yeah, very much. And they like prosecutions because that gets them press and makes them look like heroes, putting that bad guy in jail. It's a horrible system.
I guess I'd like to add that, you know, Ross's case is a travesty. Your other friends, and all these individual cases are travesties and horrible, and they shouldn't happen. But we need to keep our eye on the big picture. So if we fight with all of our effort on each individual case, yeah, that's okay, but let's strike the root. Let's undermine government's ability to prosecute people for victimless crimes across the board, across the country, and across the world. And the best tool that we have to do that, I think, at this moment is cryptocurrencies. And the more people that start using that, and the more people that use them to opt out of participating in the state systems, the less power these state systems will have to prosecute people for victimless crimes. And so that's what all of us, I think, that, you know, have this extra voluntarist chromosome should be doing ourselves, but we should encourage our friends and family to do the same. Another great example, if I can pitch something here, is Adam Kokesh is sitting over in the back there. He's running for not president of the United States here in 2012, and his platform is an orderly dissolution of the United States federal government. And I think that that could resonate with a lot of people around the country, and maybe even around the world, because there's a lot of people around the world that aren't fans of the United States federal government. And cryptocurrencies make it very, very easy for people around the world to donate to people who are running for not president of the United States. So that's another great example. So.
I'll be in the main hall at 6:15. Thank you, Roger.
My pleasure. So I guess to bring back the point here, so like, you know, obviously these individual stories are absolutely horrible, and it's sad that they happen, and we want to prevent them from happening, but let's strike the root. Let's prevent these sorts of things from being able to happen across the board for everyone on the planet. And the tools that we have at hand, the best tool we have at hand are cryptocurrencies and using those to undermine the state. And that's where I'm putting all of my effort, and I hope the rest of you in this room will agree and help out in that effort.
Could I
Yeah,
ask
sure.
the panel to comment on the reason why I think Ross is so important is because the only tools they have to stop this cryptocurrency movement are the tools they've used against your son. And I believe that we're rapidly approaching where they haven't been paying attention. The simple fact that the CEO of JP Morgan is now getting into the fray tells me that they're starting to pay attention. And since the tools that they have used on your son are the only ones that they really know how to use effectively, how can we now prepare for those tools to maybe come out and be used against more people? How can we prepare ourselves?
Any thoughts, Doc?
Well, you know,
Scary stuff.
it's scary stuff. I mean, look at Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. I mean, they're in the same class as Ross, just in variations on the theme.
And Doug dedicated his latest book to Ross and those two men. Yeah.
This is a case study that we all are invested in because these tools that they've used will and are being used right now. And I think that we as this group of individuals in this room are people who are, like you were saying, it's important that we stick together and learn how to take care of each other.
If we don't hang together, we'll hang separately.
And you,
I gotta mention, because he's a big supporter of Ross and spent a lot of time
Yeah.
on supporting
Yeah, I've
the
been.
worship there in Morpheus, Thomas Cascano
Yes.
in Arizona, a good friend
Yes.
of ours.
Yeah.
And, but the thing that is interesting in his case, he understood the risk when he was going in. I walk through the valley of death and fear no evil. I mean, he'd always say that. Well, the thing is that he's taking it because he doesn't have as much of a risk. You know, he's not facing a light well yet. But the thing is that he's willing to take the hit because he wants him to say it. What am I trying? What is crypto? What? We're going to get discovery and rock and roll. Let's do it. I'm sure that Ross's trial and a lot of the information that is going to be part of the PR and the rhetoric we're using in whether he even gets a fair trial. What is going to, because they're wanting him to settle, and the word to cooperate, what the hell that means, you become their dog for the rest of your life. We're going to get answers, and we're going to start getting into the mechanism that they used on this and the people behind it and why. And I think the definitions that are going to come out of this is going to change a lot of things, and certainly the perception that people have. Because you're right, that's what it was. It is a PR thing, and just the fact that mom won't go away is awesome.
it's the problem with being a mom. You're trapped by your love. But it's become bigger, you know, it really has. It's because I know the families now. I've seen the children, as Tatiana was saying, crushed, harmed by this. Families destroyed, the misery every time I go, not just my own, but these other people. It's horrifying, it's terrible. And we're the largest incarcerator of our citizens in the world. You know, we outdo all of these totalitarian states, and it's really wrong, and and scary, yeah. So, and I want to just say one other thing about that is that it's true that I totally agree with what Roger said, getting to the root, but what Ross and I hope in our family is that the spotlight on him, because it's been high profile, is that it can help shine a light on this. You know, it makes it, you know, puts a face on it. And that is what I hope can come of it, as well as Ross's freedom.
I have one last comment. One of the things that Ross wrote me in one of the first letters when we were writing back and forth was, Tatiana, you know, I don't want you to be upset about what happened with this or what happened with that, because as long as we're alive, there's reason to hope. And I think that's something that we can all keep in mind, even though, I mean, I see a lot of depressed-looking people out there. But I think that's really true, and it brings me a lot of comfort, so that's it.
Well, and Roger, haven't given you enough props, man. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, this is.
That's right.
Moral and the financial support and behind me why. You know, that you feel an obligation, is it a tactic, is it a tool? I mean, why are you doing it?
You only live life once, so you got to make the absolute most of it. So I'm an atheist. I don't think there's any sort of afterlife. So I want to make the absolute most of this life that I possibly can. And so, of course, you know, I want to leave the world a better place than when I came into it. So life is short. I'm 38. I can hardly believe how fast the first 38 years went. And everybody that's older than me always says it keeps going faster and faster. And if it went this fast already, man, I'm going to be 78 before I know it. So I better move even faster from here on out.
I want to just say something, too. I went to Pork Fest for the first time and spoke and posted a picture of Ross in prison, and I didn't know Roger. And he put up a retweet campaign and gave, and said, this man is either, if he's guilty, wait a minute, if he's guilty, he's a hero. If he's innocent, he needs our help. And he offered $10 per retweet and ended up donating $160,000
Wow.
in Bitcoin. And I mean, for me, feeling, you know, sometimes you feel pretty alone, and I do have a lot of support, but to get that support, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And it was just so amazing. It just made, like I say, possible to get here. And then we had an amazing event. The people in here, Ernie and others were part of. Doug, well, everybody here, and Jim, and there's all these people that are here that help support it. The Free Rossathon, and Terry Brock's brainchild. And we had an 8-hour online conference of liberty lovers and crypto people and talking about those things and Ross, and we raised close to $25,000, and then Roger stepped up and matched it. And that is helping us go further. So, and I want to say, you know, Roger's known for Bitcoin. He's a freedom fighter. He cares about freedom first and foremost, as far as I can tell. And so does Doug, so does Tatiana, and so do so many other people in here.
I got mentioned, I don't want to slightly Doug, because I've known you for a long
Doug's
time. You've
amazing,
been in the
too.
space forever. I mean, I see you as a kid on Donahue, man. I mean, so the fact that you would get involved and be such a high-profile target with a, you know, already a laser pointer on your forehead already, you know, that you would get involved with this. What was it about this that prompted your involvement?
There are so many injustices in the world. I mean, take your choice. But this is just, it's unbelievably criminal. You know, so you'd like to do something about all of them. I really like that movie, V. I hope it comes down to that.
One more question. Has Ross considered writing his own book?
Ross is dying to tell his own story, dying to. He's like, you know, and, you know, it's very hard to sit there and hear things and read things and not be able to defend yourself and tell your side. The advice of the lawyers is that's not a good idea right now. But he will, and, you know, we are in the middle of still the process, but he has done some writing. He's actually a quite good writer. In fact, some of his things are on my blog that he sent me. And I think he probably will, yeah. But
We'll be happy to read it and to support it. And, yeah, it's just-
thank you. Yeah, no, it'll be good. He's a good writer.
What about the Lynn book?
Yeah. Yes, and then there's the, yeah.
Seeing you fight this fight.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild story, I can tell you. Mother thrown into the dark net and what? I mean, it's pretty unique. Yeah, I'm going to write it.
On Tim's comment, why not write your own screenplay?
Well, I'll write a book.
That would be, there you go. Oh, we would.
I hear you know a bit about something about screenplays,
Yeah,
Doug.
Doug.
But let's fund
Let's
that
crowdfund
story. We can do that in this room.
Yes.
See, I'm afraid Ross, he writes something, he might make money and they take it or something.
No, yeah, it's right. I have to make, yeah, and I don't know, some of it, I don't know if people would actually believe, but, no, I'm going to do it. Well, I had actually had a publisher interested. I wrote a proposal, all of that, and then I ended up actually, I think I told you, out of the stress of everything, I almost died, literally. I came in the minutes of dying. I had broken heart syndrome. It's actually a real diagnosis that attacks your heart, and didn't die, thank God, I'm here, but, and didn't have brain damage, which is pretty amazing, I don't think, pretty sure. And, but it's too much for me right now, so I'm just trying to journal and all of that, but I do intend to do it. And, yeah, there should be a good role for some aging actress, don't you think?
I think that there was also some concern about committing to a film the story, because perhaps if Ross were to get a retrial, that could be used against him.
That's his
So
story,
that's
him writing it.
right, exactly. So there are some concerns around that, because personally, I'm like, yeah, let's blow this out of the water, tell the story, because that to me is what's so cool about. Oh my God, that sounds bad. But that's what's the unique opportunity there, is that there is such a compelling story that so many people can connect to. I think that really is where the value is giving people that connection. Because before I knew Ross, the drug war was just this random thing. And now it's a real thing. And it's something that I can't look away from. So.
Thank you for visiting me.
What?
I know that he is just.
Oh. I like going to visit. It's fun. We have a good time.
Yeah.
As much as you can in a prison.
Yeah. One of the things that actually I interacted with Senator Mike Lee at Freedom Fest, and he said, look, you seem like a credible person. Congress needs to see your face. And again, putting a face, an individual face on it. Statistics, you can say that all day long. So one of the things I want to do is go to Congress, go to, next, probably through the first of the year, and go to these different people. If you know a congressperson, if you know a good way to get political with this, and Ernie and I have kind of touched on it, the appellate court themselves said, well, you just need to change the law, then we could rule differently. And I'm like, okay, all right, and that is, something I intend to do. Got to try everything, right?
And once again, I'd like to add that the fundamental principles are what are really, really important here.
Yes, that's right.
And so a bunch of strangers that we've never met getting together and writing down words on a piece of paper doesn't alter morality one bit.
True.
So either people have the right to buy and sell and use and smoke drugs, or they don't. And the words being written down on a piece of paper have no effect on that whatsoever.
I agree. And, stopping, and I'm going to go speak at the Drug Policy Alliance's biannual conference in October. It's a whole thing about ending the drug war, and I think it'll probably have to take at least some steps through the system. I mean, that's unfortunate.
And
but
that's the practical answer, and I agree.
Yeah,
we
I have to be
need to always point out the first principles that are so important.
I agree.
But reality is you have to work, within the system. So yeah, taxation is theft, but you can't run a business without paying the taxes, or they'll shut you down. So
put you
I
in
know
jail.
taxation's theft. I'll say it all day long. But for all my businesses, I file all the stupid paperwork and pay all the taxes, not because I'm morally obligated to do so, but because bad people will hurt me if I don't. And
Exactly.
it's the same way with the drug war. Point out that this is insane, that they shouldn't be doing this, that it's immoral. But when you need to work within the system, you have to do that too. So go, from every angle.
Absolutely, yeah. So any help, any suggestions, any contacts,
I need dirt on Chuck Schumer.
She said that.
Cryptocurrency is, rocking the fiat currency system. And as we all know, history is repeating itself as far as all paper currencies in the past. As history said, the bankers have continued playing the game on humanity over and over, and it's this time in history that cryptocurrency is saying otherwise. Now they're scared. The bankers and the politicians are completely scared, and now they're thinking twice otherwise. But I've come across a technology in relation to law, which is called quantum law, and the gentleman that's come up with this had to fight a case to get custody of his children, and he's considered a judge, and also considered a king in the state of Hawaii because of the quantum law that he's created. And it's put the judges and all the lawyers pinned him down and take him because it's mathematically proven with his technology that they cannot lie in their paperwork. And I think that might be a technology with the blockchain that might be able to help the individuals like Ross and other people that are being taken advantage of as far as a corrupt system. So there's a website I'd encourage you guys to look at and look at David Wayne Miller. He is considered the king in the state of Hawaii because of his technology, and he has a 32nd degree Mason and a judge. And they don't disrespect him in regards to the technology that he's bringing to us.
And there's other efforts. Adam Kokesh, who is also part of the Free Rossathon, has Activists Under Fire. He introduced me to the Bundy family, which is another horrible travesty. Working different ways to shine a light on this kind of thing. So.
I think we've gone about 15 minutes over
Oh, we
our
have?
time,
Oh.
but thank you guys all very,
Thank
very,
you,
very
Roger,
much.
for being
So-
here.
Thank you.